I'm Scott Lucas. This is today's EAWorldView on Iran. Is there trouble ahead in the nuclear talks? On Wednesday, the Supreme Leader's office put out a very strange tweet. It referred to a statement that Ayatollah Khamenei had made in 2006 and said, "Why is it that when we're so honest, that our enemies are so dishonest and misleading?" Our enemies clearly in this case being the United States. So what's going on? Why was the Supreme Leader all of a sudden being very anti-American only a week after talk of how promising the nuclear talks were between Iran and the 5+1 powers, including the US? Why, if there was progress in further discussions, including a meeting in Geneva on November 7th and 8th, one with the prospect of a deal, trading limits on Iran's nuclear enrichment for a lifting of sanctions, why be so negative? Well, in fact, the answer lies in the fact that it wasn't just the Supreme Leader putting out the message. Throughout Wednesday, a series of Iranians basically criticized the United States for being deceptive, and specifically, they talked about a woman named Wendy Sherman. Now, Wendy Sherman is quite powerful. She's the lead U.S. nuclear negotiator. She was the one in Geneva last week during the so-called very positive and very useful talks. But yet both the Foreign Ministry and a high-powered commission in the parliament came out and said that Sherman had deceived and been deceptive in testimony that she gave all the way back on October the 3rd to a congressional hearing. Their bone of contention? Sherman had made a very ill-considered statement when she was talking about the need for negotiations, but also the need for caution. She said, we know that deception is in the Iranian DNA. Well, the idea that Iranians are fundamentally cheats and liars doesn't sit very well. And the head of Parliament's National Security Commission, the Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, Iran's leading Jewish member of Parliament, all came out with suitable statements to say that if Sherman was acting this way, why would we negotiate with her? But wait, if Sherman's statement was so damaging, why wasn't it talked about before the Geneva talks? Why wasn't it raised until now, 3 weeks later after she talked to Congress? The answer is that someone in Iran has gone very wobbly about what is occurring. Why are they wobbly? Here are 2 points. 1, Iran put a proposal to the United States at the Geneva talks and to the 5+1 powers, which was pretty straightforward. Look, Tehran said, we'll take our 20% production of uranium and we'll suspend it. We'll take the existing 20% stock and we'll convert it into fuel plates. The significance being that fuel plates cannot be used for any further military purpose. So look, you can trust us. We will offer to limit enrichment to 5% in return, recognize our right to do that, and start lifting sanctions. All through last week, it looked like this was a good starting point for discussion. Not only the 5+1 powers, but the United States said, look, we can talk about detailed technical talks about how to implement this. But in the last 48 hours, there's been a somewhat different message. 2 diplomats went to the Associated Press, and they said to the Associated Press on Wednesday, no, in fact, the Iranians didn't give us such a detailed offer. They said specifically that the Iranians had not done 2 things. First, the Iranians had not offered to completely close the Fordow nuclear plant. And secondly, they said the Iranians had made no offer to convert 20% enriched uranium into the fuel plates. Well, that raises a bit of a problem. Iran says on the one hand that it has been open in making an offer, and here are these unnamed diplomats who are knocking it back and saying, well, while there was some advance in the talks, it's not as great as Tehran is making it out to be. Point 2, the Supreme Leader doesn't trust the Americans. That's no secret. He's said this for years. However, in September, the Supreme Leader gave the authorization for the Rouhani government to talk to the United States and to the 5+1 powers. He called it heroic flexibility. But when he gave that authorization, he clearly said to the government, make sure you go from a position of strength and make sure that you can show me an advance in the talks. The Rouhani government came back last week and thought it had shown that advance to the Supreme Leader. But the statements in the last 48 hours from Western diplomats puts that into question. So match those 2 points together, that it looks like the United States, possibly one of its allies, is wobbling over whether or not they want to deal with the Iranians, and perhaps spinning against the Iranian proposals. And second, match that with the supreme leader. You have a very potent combination, which is not going to advance the nuclear talks, but perhaps could scuttle them. And if that happens, then the best opportunity we've had since 2009 for an agreement will suddenly evaporate. I'm Scott Lucas, and this is today's EA Worldview on Iran.